Aloha, everyone. Welcome to Connection to the Cosmos with your host, me, Dr. Lisa Thompson, where I have out-of-this-world conversations with extraordinary people. And today I have on Lauren Dionysius. I'm getting that name right, all the way from Gold Coast, Australia. So we're going to bring her on in just a moment, but first, just a couple of quick announcements. First, if you have not downloaded my free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides, make sure you grab that, mysticmanta.com or drlisajthompson.com. And if you're visiting the big island of Hawaii, not Oahu, but the big island, definitely come and see me on one of my big island UFO tours where you will be able to see the night sky with our advanced Generation 3 military night vision goggles. And while I can't 100% say you're going to see a spacecraft, you're going to see a spacecraft or a lot of them. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Lauren. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, Lisa. So lovely to be here today.
Yeah, I can't wait for our conversation. Your topic is really interesting. So I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation. First, let me introduce you to everyone. So born energy emerged through Lauren's spiritual experiences as a registered nurse, caring for over 7,000 critically ill babies requiring intensive care from birth, dealing with cases of extreme prematurity, unexpected birth trauma, congenital abnormalities, surgery, infection, and complex social situations left her questioning the why behind every baby's journey, especially when these babies did not survive. As a highly sensitive human, Lauren felt the world around her at a visceral level and began to absorb the surrounding energies, emotions, and behaviors of these babies, which was physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausting. After a much needed break, including a near-death experience in Africa, I want to talk to you about that, Lauren felt an inexplicable urge to return to the nursery. Here she began experiencing phenomena she initially dismissed: hearing unborn babies, feeling their energy fields, and seeing images of non-human beings around babies in the ICU. But it was when she experienced 3 shared death experiences, witnessing these babies' souls as they left the earth, that she realized she could no longer ignore what was happening. It was clear that both the babies and their energetic guides were trying to communicate. Deciding to listen, she discovered insights and wisdom from their perspective that not only changed the way she cared for babies clinically, but what she believed about life and death. So Lauren is now passionate about honoring the very real human experience, including grief and loss, while integrating the wisdom that babies have to share with us around their purpose, personality, past lives, perspectives, and parenting. Babies communicate from preconception through pregnancy, including miscarriage, termination, and stillbirth, and into early childhood. After all, babies are the ones who come and go from the earth, so doesn't it make sense that they have the answers to the questions we ask about them? Well, this is fascinating, Lauren, like just fascinating, because I actually, I have a few friends that have lost babies, either through miscarriage, abortion, or stillbirth, or maybe even just a few days after birth. So before we get into all of that and what the messages of the babies are and the wisdom that they have, I would love for you to share with our audience kind of how you grew up. Spiritual, religious, something else? Like, were you always in tune with this kind of stuff?
No, I wasn't. So I grew up in a very strict Christian family, going to church every Sunday, doing all the things, the study, the youth groups, the confirmation, all of those things were very much part of my world from the beginning. I do remember having a couple of, memories of beings around me when I was around about a toddler, like maybe 2 years old, 3 maybe. And then there was nothing. I think my upbringing sort of, squashed that part of me, and I wasn't able to explore that. It was kind of anything that wasn't religion was, I guess, sort of work of the devil type thing. So it was something that, in hindsight, I had a lot of the gifts were there, but they were very much suppressed. And so I had this very strict upbringing, and I left the church in my late teens, early 20s, somewhere around there, with a lot of guilt, but also having this knowing that it just wasn't aligned. And I knew that from a young age. I just felt that, no, there's something that doesn't quite make sense here to me. And a lot of that was around the fear and the all or nothing, yes, no, it's either good or it's bad. And, you know, a lot of these types of, I guess, the dogma or the beliefs that were kind of instilled into us. And so, yeah, in my early 20s, I began to move away from all of that. And it's been quite the journey for me as an adult, sort of undoing a lot of that and unpacking a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then during that process, you know, I guess my spiritual gifts have been able to come back online, and I've been able to explore those in really quite unique and different ways because of my upbringing. So it's been a complete 360 for me with with the spiritual side of things, having that very strict religious upbringing, and then moving away from that into something that's very different to my family even now, are very still mostly sort of in that religious realm. So but yeah, it's been something I've needed to journey through and to reconnect to my own inner truth and what feels right and aligned for me. Has been stepping away from that, and it's been quite the journey to do that.
Yeah. Well, so okay, so being an RN, a registered nurse, that's pretty mainstream, normal career. And I'm a former scientist, so come from that world as well. But okay, so how did this all come about with the babies?
Yeah, well, ever since I was a child, I remember being a 5-year-old and, people would say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'd be like, I want to be a nurse and look after the babies. And that really never faltered throughout, even though I had that very strict upbringing. Nursing was something that was very much supported by my family, to do that and to go to university. And, that was all very well supported. So I did that. I finished my nursing training in 2000 and then went as a very green 20-year-old and very naive in many ways into a very real world, around life and death, and really big responsibilities around that as a clinician. And so after a couple of years doing some general nursing, I got a job in the nursery. So by the age of 23, I was in my dream job, except it wasn't necessarily what I expected, because again, as a very sensitive soul, I really struggled emotionally and ethically with working in that world of not just the science side of it, but it became very real to me that babies didn't survive, that they weren't all born happy and healthy and pink and got to stay with their mums and have this really beautiful experience. I was dealing with the worst of birth, and I've sort of seen everything that can go wrong and has gone wrong, and it was emotionally and mentally, it was a real struggle for me. And so I did it for about 8 or 9 years, and I got to this point where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. And I got really angry at at God, whatever that God figure was to me back then, and that he was doing a really bad job if he was allowing babies to die. And so I left. I thought, what, I just need to take a break. So I saved up all my holiday leave, and I just went to Africa on a one-way ticket, and I planned a couple of things. I thought, I'm going to go and volunteer with the animals. Don't want anything to do with doctors, nurses, hospitals, healthcare, babies, parents. So animals seemed like a safe place to be, right? And I did. I had a fantastic time, and I was over there for 7 months volunteering and having all kinds of crazy experiences. And that's when I decided to go whitewater rafting in the Zambezi River. And so it was the end of the low season. It was the very last day of the season, actually. So the water was really low. And so I had this experience, and it wasn't, you hear a lot about near-death experiences being really nice, and you're seeing the light, and there's like all these like really friendly beings around you, and you don't want to go back to your body. And to me, it was not that. It was a very, it was a very scary experience for me. Yes, I had a dark tunnel. Everything went black. I had that feeling of, I knew my body was underwater. I didn't know where, like, I had no orientation of whether I was, up the right way or upside down, or I had no sense of orientation of my body in the water. I could feel my body being hit by rocks, but I didn't know where I was within that or how far under I was. But I had this sensation of being outside of my body, looking back on my body, but everything was black. The only light I could see was a screen, and that was with a lot of different parts of my life. I could see. I was, I guess it was that life review that's often talked about when it comes to near-death experiences, and it was scary for me because I was having a ball in Africa. I did not want to die. I knew it wasn't my time. I also very much had a fear of death as well after witnessing a lot of death in my, clinically in my job. Right. And as a child, I had some loss as a child as well. And so, so it was very, very frightening for me. But I did have a lot of, in hindsight, there were beings around me that were, this isn't your time. It's, you're not ready to go yet. There's still work that you need to do. And I just kept seeing a picture of my niece, who at the time was maybe 6 or 8 years old. And I'm like, I have to go back for her. I have to go back for the children. I have to go back, And I had no idea about what was coming, of course, but I ended up being rescued by a man in a kayak. Because I'm like, why aren't they rescuing me? And I went through 2 or 3 rapids in the water. So it wasn't a huge period of time. It was only like a few minutes, I guess, I was in the water, but completely changed the trajectory of my life. Not only my career, like career-wise, but also it really got me curious about more of the spiritual side of life. Because until then, I'd sort of dabbled in a bit of yoga, but that was it. I was still working from pulling away from the church and just like exploring, what else is out there and, what interests me and that. But after that experience in Africa, I came home to Australia like within a month or 2 of that experience, and still didn't want to have anything to do with babies. So I worked in other areas of nursing for about 3 years. And then I felt this call to go back, and I'm like, no, like I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to be helping, withdraw care from babies and turn off their life support and, remove their breathing tubes and all of that. I'm like, no, like I'm not going to do that. Like I'm just not. So there's got to be another plan because I'm not doing that. Like it's not part of my repertoire. And so I sort of had this like on off, argument, I guess, in many ways, or resistance with the universe. And then things happened. I ended up moving and all of this. And then I just, I thought, okay, well, if I have to go back to the nursery, I'm only going to work with well babies. So it's the babies that are just a little bit prem and they just need to grow and get a bit bigger and learn how to eat properly. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And so that's where it started. But then it's sort of, I gradually began working with the sicker babies because, my experience was sort of there, I guess. And, with hospitals, they're often short-staffed. And so I was gradually, without even really knowing what was happening, ended up in ICU again with the babies. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, it's got to be different this time round because I can't keep running away to Africa when I can't deal with this. Like I've done it once. I'm really glad I did it and I had a ball and it was amazing, but I can't keep doing that as a way to cope with this stuff. Like it's, And it just sort of, that was then the start of another profound journey for me with experiencing, having these different experiences that initially I thought I was going crazy. And I did actually take some time off work because I thought I've just done too many night shifts. I need to take a break. My mind is like going a bit crazy, like I'm stressed. The nurse in me.
Can you give us an example of what one of these experiences that you thought you were like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Well, my first experience was on a night shift, and I was working at a big city intensive care unit for babies, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had this experience. I was working one-on-one with a baby who was who had an infection, so we were in isolation. So it was only me and this baby, and I was getting really frustrated with her because she wouldn't stop crying, and I'd done all of the things, and she was fed and she was clean and she was warm, and she was still yelling at me. And I was, I'm also very human and very tired at 3 a.m. And so I went over to her cot and I saw an image around her, and it was, now this sounds really weird, so like bear with me, but I actually saw an image of Elmer Fudd like over her cot. It was this cartoon kind of caricature type image. Again, it was like not obviously in the 3D realm. He wasn't standing there over her cot, but it was like this this layer that it comes over my own perception or my own vision, and I saw this this cartoon image above her cot, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, what on earth? Like, who is what? What's going on? And as I was doing this, I got her. I thought I'm just going to put her dummy in, her pacifier, like into her mouth to settle her and all of that. And because I just wanted her to go to sleep so I could have a nap in the corner as well. And as I did this, the face changed and there was this sense of shock and confusion. And I'm like, what? Like, not only is this character here and I'm seeing this, but now the picture is changing seemingly in response to how I'm working with this baby or what's happening with this baby. And then my awareness sort of come back to this actual baby in the cot, and she was looking at me with the eyes wide open and like, what are you doing to me? And there was this sense of, I guess I'd done enough spiritual work and inner work myself to realize that I've just silenced her voice, and I have tried to manipulate her in some ways to do what I wanted to do. And in the process, I've silenced her, I've shut her down, I've suppressed her. Oh my God, this is the beginning of all the problems that we have as humans, right? When we are like suppressing and we're not sharing our voice and we're afraid to talk and share and all these things. And there was this sense of, oh my God, like, what have I done? I just felt really guilty and really awful. And I'm like, why? She's trying to tell me something and I don't want to listen, and all this was going on at 3 a.m. and I was very tired and nauseous and headachy and all the things. And so I picked her up and held her and apologized, and and then I sort of had this bit of a weird conversation, and there was no judgment from her to me, but it was just this realization from me to her, oh my God, look what I've done. And trying to understand that, but at the same time it was so incredibly clear, and it's like all these, I guess, pieces of the puzzle fell into place for me in that moment. But this is looking back in hindsight, but at the time I'm like, I've done way too many nights now. I need a break because I'm losing my marbles and I need to like sort myself out and take a break. So I did. I took 2 weeks off, and but it didn't work. It didn't help, and I started having these these experiences that just kept coming, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to ignore them because I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm really confused. They're weird. So I'm just going to keep trying to be a normal nurse. And do my job as I'm being paid to do and trained to do. And I'm just going to, allow myself to just maybe be a little bit entertained by this stuff, but not, not take it too much to heart or pay too much attention. And because I think at this point I still felt that it was my imagination. And I'm just like, again, I've always been told I've got a very active imagination. And I'm like, that's just it playing out in my world, not knowing that it was some kind of intuitive gift that was trying to come through, and also that beings were trying to communicate with me. And I'm like, I don't want to listen.
Yeah. Well, when did you finally make that transition to acknowledge and allow it?
It was probably after 12 months. And
okay,
that's when it was a while to where I'm just like, again, I was getting to this point where this is kind of interesting and I'm curious, but what do I do with it? Is it just for my entertainment? Obviously working in a hospital, I couldn't just start talking about this stuff to my colleagues, right?
Right. The parents or anyone.
Exactly. It's not the sort of thing you can discuss on your lunch break or anything like that. And so there was no outlet for me to be able to share it. And so it was just something that I guess I hid it, and I guess during that process over time, I become more and more misaligned with my role as a nurse, because there was a big part of me that I wasn't honoring and was starting to really just not align with, with working with babies in that way. But it's what I knew. And so that's why I sort of kept going, for many more years until I stepped out of that. But there was a period of about 4 years, I think, where I thought, okay, this is really interesting, and I'm going to start, I can't really talk about it, but I'm going to start writing. So I started keeping journals whenever I had these experiences. And so it was about 4 years where I was open to these experiences, and I was really intrigued and curious. And I thought, maybe I'll write a book about it one day. That was kind of where I thought it was going. And then eventually I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. I actually need to get out. Like, I need to leave the hospital. I need to hang up my scrubs and just not be a nurse anymore, because this other part of me was becoming so strong. I'd started seeing, starting to see clients on the side that I was sort of working more in the nervous system balance, restorative yoga type space. And what was happening is that women who were trying to conceive or had lost a baby or were pregnant or had a newborn, I was starting to draw those women into my clientele. And so it then became a place where I could share these experiences that I was having. But it was quite a journey to get to that point. So yeah, but I learned so much. I always say that the babies were my greatest teachers, and that period of time where I was working as a nurse in the hospital, and I just had so much exposure to different types of babies, and being able to learn about their energy field. And I'd start exploring like how I spoke to them, how I touched them, and I would correlate that with their cardiac monitor, so I could see. Again, the left brain, science-based, evidence-based nurse in me likes to see the evidence. And so I just started exploring that. If I approach them from the feet, how does that affect their heart rate and their breathing rate? And if I touch them on the head, how does that affect them? And if I talk to them or don't talk to them, how does that change their vital signs? And how does that change from their baseline? So I spent 4 years like doing that to help me to understand them more deeply, but also to find a way, I guess, for my left brain, my logical, scientific mind to, I guess, process like these other experiences that were happening. Okay. So yeah.
Okay, so we're at the point where I want to ask, so what are some of the things that the babies were sharing with you? And like different examples, because
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
we're all energy, and I totally understand, yeah, that babies, adults, anyone,
Yeah.
has this ability to communicate. So I'm just, yeah, what did you
Yeah. So yeah, there's lots of different things that they share. One thing that they tend to share is whether they've been to Earth before, so or not. And I remember because I'd gotten used to what a baby's energy feels like, and even what their soul feels like within that space. And so I remember when I first started caring for a baby, and I just knew, I'm like, you have not been here before. You have never been here on the earth. You've never incarnated before. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with you. Like, how do I? The energy felt so different, is probably the best way to describe it. And then this soul didn't so much communicate verbally or even visually. It was more through feeling. And that's the other thing I find, is that just like us here on earth, some of us are better speakers, others are better writers, others might be more visually creative and paint or draw. And I find it's very much the same thing in my experience in spirit. So some babies or some souls are very visual. So they'll show me pictures of, it might be pictures of past lives. They can show me pictures of their future lives and what they're coming here to do, which goes a little bit more into their purpose. Other babies, especially those who have been to Earth recently, when I say recently, probably the last few hundred years, I guess, like they are able to have a conversation, like we are. It's something that I understand. I don't feel there needs to be a translation process happening. There's this sense of just having a conversation. There may be images there sometimes. Sometimes it's purely like auditory, like it's just hearing the words and the conversations. And then other babies will communicate through energy, or I'll get different sensations in my body. Or sometimes like they'll just drop, like it's hard to explain, but sometimes they'll just like drop off a concept to me. It's like they'll just flying by and they like drop it into my brain, and then I need time to sit with that and allow it to kind of filter through my brain in a way that I can talk about it or write about it or explain it in some way. And so it's sort of like, yeah, probably like the first thing that really comes through is it's like, okay, well, what does their energy feel like, and how do they need to communicate? And do I need to call in more beings to help me understand them? And I need to at times. I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. I don't know what you're trying to share with me. I'm willing to listen, but we need a third party here to help, decipher and understand things. And that's when I'll call in my guides and different beings who can help the human me, I guess, understand things a little bit more. But yeah, so as far as I guess what they like to share is they like to share around what we can do to prepare for them. Especially I work with a lot of women who are trying to conceive or experiencing infertility issues, and so there can be a lot of wisdom that these incoming souls share with us about what they need, whether there's something physically going on with mum, whether there's something in the relationship that needs some resolution. Some babies have even shared, like, I don't want to live in the house that you live in, like we need to move house. And that can be, I'm like, I can't tell this family they need to up and move. But when that happens, it's normally because they've been considering like, oh, maybe we could move to the country, or so there's usually something there. But they can have very specific requests around what they need for their conception. They also share around, especially those souls that have come through briefly and then have been left through miscarriage, stillbirth, abortion, termination, all of that. They also have really important messages to share around what's going on for them. I think as humans, we naturally focus on the journey from our perspective, and we see things as, you know, like, what did I do wrong, or I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done that, or, you know, all of these things, when actually when we peel it back and these babies share, well, actually, I need some time to get used to the earth's energy. You know, they're coming from a very high vibrational space and energy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, crash landing onto this planet that is so vastly different from their own energetic essence that they need time to adjust. And so they will often come for a couple of months and then leave. And they may need to do that a few times in order to help calibrate their energy to the earth. So lots comes through around that, as well as different social experiences as well. You know, that's something I really struggled with as a nurse, with babies being born addicted to drugs or into really challenging social situations. That was something else I found really, really hard. And so they can often share wisdom around that as well. And it can often be very, well, it was very confronting for me because my human side still couldn't really understand that to a level where it's almost like their answers weren't good enough to kind of justify it for me, I guess, and to help me to understand why a soul would choose that. You know, the human part of me finds that really hard, but by being open to, I guess, the soul's perspective of that, helped me to deal with that more, and understand that a little bit more. So yes, they also like to share about their personality, the energy that they bring through often will give insight into their personality, what they're coming here to learn, what they're coming here to teach us. Some souls have a collective purpose as well around, especially at the moment, there's a lot around changing traditions around families and what that looks like, and parents and what parents look like and their roles, their gender roles. Lots of changes around, gender identity, sexuality, all of that. There's a lot of souls coming through to help shift these types of perceptions in our society. So, yeah, they share all sorts.
Okay. Well, wow. Well, so one of the things that, you know, that I understand from my own experiences and just talking to a lot of other people is that we all come in when we're born, we all come in with soul contracts that we've agreed to and with the people in our lives. Even if it's just like me and you, Lauren, we have a soul contract to be here to talk and have this conversation right now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're choosing the situations that, whether they are really beautiful experiences or they're really like major life lessons, really hard earth lessons. And so it's interesting that you had to come to terms with that, I guess, from your own perspective of the babies. Just I'm assuming giving you the information like, yeah, I chose this parent, I chose this situation, and it's for me to learn.
Yeah.
And maybe the parent to learn too, because we're all learning together, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, if we're coming here to work on a particular pattern or a particular wound or soul imprint that we're coming here to work with, then often we need to recreate that situation first, right, before we can work on that. And so that's what I found a lot with these babies being born addicted to drugs or being born into families with domestic violence. They were the two things I really struggled with as a human working in this environment. And you know, and I remember one of the things that a baby communicated with me, she was a twin and born into this type of social situation. And, you know, I can't remember her exact words off the top of my head, but the gist of it was, it just shows your own, what was it? My own intolerance of differences and my own preconceived ideas of what things should look like, and also my own lack of understanding of the bigger picture. And it was slightly different words to that, but it was like, when that come through to me, I was like, oh my God, you know, it was kind of like you want to walk away with your tail between your legs kind of thing, you know, it's like, oh my God, yeah, like, you know, so a lot of things like that happened, which were very confronting, I guess, to my own beliefs and my own, I guess, not necessarily morals, but my own thoughts or beliefs, around what's right and what's wrong, and having to really let go of that in almost every area, or probably every area of my life, because it's just not like that, right? Think this black and white, right or wrong, yes, no, is so, it's too extreme. Like, in my experience, like, things fit in the middle of those. It's not one or the other.
Right.
So they really stretched my mind there with those things around, like, well, yeah, like what's in me that's judging that this situation is wrong for this child, without knowing their reasons for coming and why they would want to experience this. Like, how can I just automatically say that what's happened is wrong? And
Right.
it does show our own intolerance or
It
ignorance.
does. It does. And this conversation is just perfect timing because of how divided the world is right now. It's not just my country, but the entire world is so
Absolutely.
extremely polarized and judging each other. And like, really, it seems like more extreme than it has been in previous times in my this earth life anyway. And so one of the things that my ETs remind us is, from that higher perspective, do not judge. You don't, because we all come to learn different things. We all need these different experiences. We are choosing these experiences. And, I mean, when we're talking about babies and even the abortion issue, termination issue, there's so much controversy over that because some of the highly religious people don't understand that this is energy. This is simply a costume.
Yeah.
It is like the one and done, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, and I think on that as well, like, I guess the way I see, miscarriage and abortion, the main difference is, it's like, well, whose soul decides when to leave? And for miscarriage, it's it's the baby's soul. It's like, okay, I need to this is as far as I want to go, and I'm going to leave now. So it's like that soul that makes the decision. But as humans, where we also have our own soul, right? And we also have our own decisions and free will, and talking about that bigger picture of coming to the earth to perhaps, help to balance different past life wounds and karma and all of these things. Like, again, looking at the bigger picture, how empowering is it for a woman to be able to make that decision about her body? And it's like, you know what, no, this isn't right for me. And it's not right for, whatever that context is. And how empowering for the soul to say, no, this is not what's right for me at this time. It's not what I want. It's, and again, the reasons don't matter. But again, it's the soul's perspective and the soul's journey. And growth and expansion to say no, especially if in a previous life that they haven't had that choice. And so it's so empowering to say, okay, I get to make a choice here. And that's often the lesson and the growth from the soul's perspective in those situations, particularly with termination or abortion. So it's such an empowering decision, but there's all these layers that are around that as well, social layers from society.
There really are.
Yeah.
Well, this whole conversation, you're the first one that I've had on that this specializes in this. I'm like 80 plus episodes now, and so it's a really interesting thing to, I think a lot of humans think that, okay, when they're holding this little baby that, okay, well, they don't know anything. They're, they just don't understand the wisdom that really is already existing in this little entity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I have 2 children myself. So when I was pregnant with her, she came to me in my dreams and would communicate somewhat. There was at one point when I was trying to figure out what sex she was, they did the ultrasound and she didn't want to show us, but she came to me in my dream and showed me in the dream. And I, when we're talking about, choosing hard situations, well, her father, he was a challenging one for us. I had to kick him out of the house when she was 7 months old. And so came in with all of these really hard life lessons, and still working through as a teenager, of course. And so anyway, and I just, again, like, I've had friends who have gone through all the experiences that you've talked about. And so like, how do mothers come to you and hire you to talk to their babies? Like, how do you work with people now?
Yeah, so I do at the moment. I'm doing a baby soul reading, so working with women one-to-one, and we do I do in-person sessions here on the Gold Coast, but I also work with a lot of women all over the world via Zoom. I also do distant sessions as well, where there's actually no talking, because sometimes, especially if there's any sort of loss involved, sometimes women don't want to talk about that, or they're not ready, or it might be too raw or too painful. And I'm really passionate about allowing, honoring that as well. And so then what I do is I send out a form that allows women to, if they have any specific questions, sometimes they leave it blank if they just want to see what is going to come through. And then once I receive that information back, then most of the time I allow for the babies to come to me. So I'm very much, I see myself as a receiver and here to share, but I feel very passionate about and very focused on, I'm not going to go out ambushing them and like looking for them and like kind of hunting them down and harassing them. I'm like, I've connected with your mother or your future mother, whatever it may be. I can feel you. I'm here. Let me know when you're ready to communicate and, what that might look like. And so normally I get this sense of, oh, okay, I'm going to be doing a reading this morning. This is if I'm doing a distant one, obviously. With Zoom, it's a bit different, because there is that time allocated.
Come on, ladies, come on.
Yeah, that's right. I'm like, you're up. It's 10 a.m. Like, it's time. But even with those, I do some prep work before as well to establish the connection, just so I can go into that deeper space of meditation. Because what I do to connect is I go very much inwards. I actually go in and down and work with the earth's energy to really ground myself into the earth's energy. And again, to just have that foundation first and that grounding. And then that, I don't know, like, I guess my brain kind of likens it to gravity. It's like, then it draws them towards me. And then I just listen. So I ask questions, especially if the parents have questions, but I just like to listen and allow them to share what they want to share and how they want to share that, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's visual or words or feelings. And I just allow that to happen. And it normally takes an hour, give or take, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending how much they want to share with me. And then it can, anything can come through in any way, shape or form. Lots of different energies can come through as well. There's I'm starting to work more in the galactic realms, because there's a lot of souls coming to the earth who haven't been before. It's a whole wave of them coming at the moment. And so I'm working with a lot of energies that I'm like, yeah, you're not an angel, or you're not, they're very different energies and can be very like energetically intense, where I'm like, okay, dude, you've got to like back off a bit, because I've lost my sense of self here. So
I'll ask you a question about that real quick, because I have that sense too, that like we have a lot more starseeds being born, and part of that is to be here to bridge that gap between meeting our galactic family out there, right, and becoming part of this greater galactic world. But I'm curious what kind of messages the galactic babies are bringing compared to, I guess, more of the earthbound, already been here on Earth before babies.
Yeah, the galactic ones, they're very unique. Like they have this energy that is, I guess, from the Earth's perspective, very much like a blank slate. But they have, what I find with them is they have this sense of wisdom that is so far beyond the human understanding and are so advanced that a lot of these souls that are coming to Earth, like, you know, at the moment and in the coming years, there are, as far as their purpose goes, they have a lot of, I guess, work to do around technology, around systems, around, like I mentioned before, really shaking up some of these social constructs about, you know, families and and again, like the gender identity thing that's going on around the planet at the moment, as people become more open and expansive to different ways of being. I'm finding a lot of these galactic souls are having a really big role to play in that as well. It's just like that expansion of beyond what we've considered like normal in the past. And so they are having a lot of like really big roles and purposes around that, but they also are also really struggling energetically with being on the earth. And they, you know, it's even, you know, it's hard for a soul that hasn't been on the earth for 500 years to come back. Like they're going to struggle, but it's even harder if you've never been to a planet before. You don't speak the language, you don't know the rules, you don't know how things operate, you're not used to being in this sort of body. And so they also, even though they have like a big role and like sort of higher purpose roles, like for the collective, individually, yes, but more so for the collective, these souls, they also are some that have, the biggest struggles and find it the hardest to adapt. And they can have so many then different issues, if you like, around behavior and emotions and being grounded. And, you know, I see a lot of kids with different types of medical issues or behavioral issues, or, you know, emotional dysregulation and feeling really unsafe in the world, and separation anxiety, and like all these sorts of things. And not all of them, but a lot of these souls, I'm seeing this pattern of these galactic beings and these galactic energies that, you know, you can imagine, like, you know, if you suddenly go to a country you've never been to before and you don't speak the language, you don't know where to go, you don't know how to get to your hotel, you don't know anyone there, you know, it's going to be jarring, right? And confusing and disorientating and like, all of the above. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. And actually, and we're running out of time here, but I just this is so, again, it's fascinating. And I think hopefully the audience will really start opening their minds. And I know some of my listeners already like understand this stuff, but some of them might not really understand it in the way that we talked about it. So just, shifting perspective and being open, not judging. So just, how do people find you first? Where can they?
So I'm on social. So on Facebook and Instagram, my business is Born Energy. So you can find me there. Also have a website, bornenergy.com.au. So that's my website. That's where I've got I'm actually updating my website at the moment. So there's just a link to my booking page at the moment with the different services, but there you'll find the different options that I have. I tend to work with people probably according to their degree of openness or curiosity. So I have some really brief, short, sharp options if people are a little bit like, oh, I'm not really sure about this, I don't know if I believe it, I don't know if she's legit, I don't, you know, these sorts of things. From that to like some really, really deep dive sessions, sort of on the other end of the scale. So there's usually something there for everyone, whether they're just like, oh, I think I'll just want to dip my toes in, but I'm not sure, to I mean, like, tell me everything.
Okay. So in what I guess age? So let's say a woman isn't pregnant yet. Do you work with them?
Yeah.
Is there, and a question about that. is there already like a soul that's energetically around that mother that is giving the messages? It's like, yeah, she's my mom. Give her these messages.
Yeah, so I've never had a client where there hasn't been any baby souls. Like I call them baby souls rather than spirit babies, only because the work I do goes beyond just working with babies in spirit before they've conceived. That tends to be the definition of a spirit baby. So working with preconception, like every woman that I've worked with in my experience, I mean, obviously I haven't checked the energy fields of every woman on the planet, but with those drawn to my work, I've never come across with anyone that where it's been like, oh, sorry, there's like no babies around you. So I actually believe we all have baby souls in our energy field around us, but the important thing to understand is they come with different purposes, and not all of those purposes is to necessarily incarnate onto the planet. For many it is, but not all. So that's where this work preconception can help to find out, okay, well, who in your energy field is planning a life here on Earth, and what can you do to support that? And it sort of works along the full spectrum, because I do most of my work with women who are trying to conceive and women who've experienced loss. That's the two, I guess, biggest cohorts of like the clientele that I work with. But they also communicate, during pregnancy. They can often, excuse me, offer different types of wisdom or guidance for their birth as well, and what roles or what people they may would prefer to be present for their birth. And then also they communicate. I find children communicate up until around like 13, 14 is when it's usually fairly easily to access their soul. Once they get into the teenage years, I think that's a whole different realm of their growth, right, as a soul, and often that's when they can become a little bit more disconnected from their higher self and their soul. And so I find it's a little bit harder to connect, or they may not necessarily want to share. It's kind of like, I just need to go through this journey. And then, but also working with the woman's soul as well, and and the partner and siblings. So it's kind of any of those pieces of the puzzle can come into the connection or the communication side. Some souls are around their siblings. So I tune into mum's energy field, and it's like, oh, not really feeling. But when they say, oh, I've got a 2-year-old, I tune into the 2-year-old, and there's a sibling there that's had past life connections with the toddler before, and so they're predominantly in their energy field. So but they're always there. It's just working out. Excuse me, I don't know why my voice is going funny. They're just like, what is their purpose for their journey? What's their soul's plan?
Okay, well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom. And I would encourage the audience, if you are in any of the situations that Lauren mentioned, definitely check out her website, bornenergy.com.au. And I appreciate meeting you, Lauren. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been great to chat to you and connect with your audience. And it's been wonderful being able to share this information and get it out to those that need to hear. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. And thank you for those watching or listening. I'll see you next time on Connection to the Cosmos. Aloha.